Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished setting up the atmospheric processor. The jungle moon of Kepler 442c was nothing like the recruitment videos had promised. Instead of the lush paradise perfect for human colonization, he found himself surrounded by towering trees that blocked out most of the sunlight, creating an eternal twilight filled with strange sounds and moving shadows. The colonization ship New Horizon had dropped him and 47 other pioneers 6 months ago with promises to return in 2 years. Marcus was beginning to think 2 years might be optimistic. The atmospheric readings were all wrong, the soil samples showed trace elements that shouldn't exist, and the local wildlife was far more aggressive than the initial surveys had indicated. He checked his tablet for the 3rd time that morning. The settlement's defensive perimeter was holding, but barely. Last week, they'd lost 2 people to something the locals called shadow runners, fast-moving predators that hunted in packs and seemed to melt into the darkness between the trees. The week before that, a creature the size of a small shuttle had torn through their outer fence like it was made of paper. Marcus shouldered his plasma rifle and began walking the perimeter. As the settlement's head of security, it was his job to keep everyone alive until the next supply drop. It wasn't a job he'd wanted, but when the previous security chief had been found torn in half by something with claws the size of dinner plates, the position had become available rather suddenly. The sound of children laughing made him smile despite his worries. At least some people were adapting well to their new home. Dr. Sarah Kim had done an amazing job setting up the education center, and the 12 children in the colony seemed to think living on an alien moon was the greatest adventure possible. Their parents were less enthusiastic, but children had a way of finding joy even in the most dangerous circumstances. Marcus was checking the motion sensors when he heard it, a low growling sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. He froze, his hand moving to his weapon. The jungle had gone completely silent, which was never a good sign. Even the insects that usually buzzed constantly had stopped their noise. He activated his comm unit. "Control, this is Chen. I'm picking up unusual sounds in Sector 7. Requesting backup." "Copy that, Chen," came the reply from Maria Santos, their communications officer. "Teams 4 and 6 are responding. ETA 3 minutes." Marcus crept forward, using the massive tree trunks for cover. The growling sound was getting closer, and now he could hear something else, the sound of large bodies moving through the underbrush. Whatever was out there, there was more than one of them. He reached the edge of the cleared area around the settlement and peered into the jungle. At first, he saw nothing but shadows and twisted vines. Then, movement caught his eye, and his blood ran cold. 3 creatures were stalking through the trees about 50 meters away. They were unlike anything in the colony's database, roughly the size of earth bears but built like prehistoric wolves, with elongated skulls filled with too many teeth and eyes that glowed with an unnatural green light. Their hide was dark and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making them difficult to see even when they moved. Marcus raised his rifle and activated the targeting system. The creatures hadn't noticed him yet, but they were moving with purpose towards something. He followed their gaze and his heart nearly stopped. About 20 meters ahead of the creatures, completely unaware of the danger, 2 of the colony's children were playing in a small clearing. Tommy Kim, Dr. Kim's 8-year-old son, was chasing Lisa Santos, Maria's 6-year-old daughter, around a fallen log. They were laughing and shouting, making enough noise to attract every predator within kilometers. Marcus activated his comm again, keeping his voice low. "Control, we have a code red situation. 2 children in immediate danger, Sector 7 clearing. Abort backup teams to my location now. Chen, what's your status?" Maria's voice crackled with static and worry. 3 unknown predators, approximately 50 meters from your daughter and Tommy Kim. I'm moving to intercept. Marcus didn't wait for a response. He broke cover and ran toward the children, his boots pounding against the soft jungle floor. The creatures heard him immediately and turned their glowing eyes in his direction. Up close, they were even more terrifying. Their mouths opened to reveal rows of serrated teeth, and they began making a sound that was part roar, part howl. "Tommy! Lisa! Get behind the log now!" Marcus shouted as he reached the clearing. The children looked up in confusion, then terror as they saw the creatures emerging from the jungle. Tommy grabbed Lisa's hand and pulled her behind the fallen tree, both of them crying now. The largest of the 3 predators, easily twice the size of the other 2, stepped into the clearing. Its eyes fixed on Marcus, and it tilted its head as if studying him. Then, it opened its mouth and let out a sound that seemed to vibrate through Marcus's bones. Marcus raised his rifle and fired a warning shot over the creature's head. The plasma bolt seared through the air and struck a tree, leaving a smoking hole in the bark. The creatures didn't even flinch. Okay, Marcus muttered to himself, that's not good. The largest predator began moving toward him with slow, deliberate steps. The other two spread out to flank him, their movements coordinated like a pack of wolves. Marcus realized with growing dread that these weren't just animals, they were intelligent hunters. He fired again, this time aiming for the lead creature's center mass. The plasma bolt struck it square in the chest, and Marcus expected to see the creature collapse. Instead, the energy seemed to dissipate across its hide like water hitting oil. The creature paused for a moment, shook its head, and continued advancing. Well, that's definitely not good, Marcus said aloud. Behind him, he could hear the children whimpering. He glanced back and saw them huddled together behind the log, Tommy trying to comfort Lisa even though he was clearly terrified himself. The sight filled Marcus with a rage he hadn't felt since his military days. The flanking predators were close enough now that he could smell them, a mixture of rotting meat and something chemical that burned his nostrils. Marcus switched his rifle to full automatic and began firing in controlled bursts, trying to drive them back. The plasma bolts seemed to annoy the creatures more than hurt them, but they did slow their advance. Marcus used the time to back toward the children, positioning himself between them and the pack. Control, where's my backup? He called into his calm 2 minutes out, Shen. Hold your position. Position's holding me, Marcus replied grimly. The lead predator had stopped about 10 meters away and was watching him with what looked disturbingly like amusement. It turned its head toward the children and made a sound that might have been laughter. That was when Marcus knew these creatures weren't just hunting for food. They were hunting for sport. The realization triggered something deep in Marcus's brain, something left over from humanity's own predatory past. His vision sharpened, his breathing steadied, and a cold calm settled over him. He'd felt this way before, during the worst fighting on Europa Station, when the choice was kill or die. Marcus ejected the spent power cell from his rifle and slammed in a fresh one. Then, he did something that surprised even himself. He began walking toward the largest predator. You want to hunt something? He said quietly, his voice carrying in the sudden silence of the jungle. Let's see how you handle prey that fights back. The creature's head tilted again, and its eyes narrowed. It took a step back, and Marcus saw something he hadn't expected, uncertainty. Marcus kept walking forward, his rifle trained on the creature's head. That's right, you bastard. I'm not running. I'm not hiding. I'm coming for you. The two flanking predators moved closer to their leader, making nervous sounds. Marcus could see their confidence wavering. They were used to hunting things that ran, not things that stalked them back. The thing about humans, Marcus continued, his voice getting louder, is that we used to be predators too. We hunted mammoths with pointy sticks. We chased down prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. We're very, very good at killing things that want to kill us. The lead creature's lips pulled back in what might have been a snarl or a grin. It crouched down, preparing to spring. Marcus smiled back, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Come on then. Let's dance. The jungle exploded into motion as all three creatures lunged toward him at once. Marcus ducked to the side, rolling behind a tree as claws raked through the air where his head had been. He came up firing, pumping plasma bolts into the nearest creature's flank. This time, the shot seemed to have more effect. The creature stumbled and let out a pained howl. Dark fluid that might have been blood began seeping from several wounds. Marcus kept moving, using the trees for cover as the predators tried to surround him. He could hear the sound of running feet getting closer, his backup was almost here. He just had to keep the creatures busy for another minute. The largest predator was circling around to cut off his retreat toward the children. Marcus couldn't let that happen. He burst from cover and charged directly at the creature, firing as he ran. The predator reared back in surprise, clearly, it had never had prey charge at it before. Marcus slammed into its chest and knocked it backward, then pressed his rifle against its throat and pulled the trigger. The close-range plasma bolt burned through whatever natural armor the creature possessed. It let out a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe and collapsed, its glowing eyes fading to black. The other two predators froze, staring at their fallen leader. They looked at Marcus, then at their dead packmate, then back at Marcus. He could almost see them trying to process what had just happened. "That's right," Marcus said, breathing hard but keeping his rifle trained on them. The prey just became the predator. "Anyone else want to play?" The sound of human voices shouting reached the clearing as Marcus's backup finally arrived. 6 armed colonists burst through the jungle, weapons raised. The remaining predators took one look at the humans and decided they wanted no part of whatever Marcus was. They melted back into the jungle so quickly that Marcus wondered if he'd imagined them. Only the body of their leader proved the encounter had been real. "Shun. You okay?" Dr. Kim ran into the clearing, followed by Maria Santos and 4 other colonists. "I'm fine," Marcus replied, though his hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "The kids are behind the log." Maria rushed to her daughter while Dr. Kim scooped up his son. Both children were crying but unharmed. Tommy looked up at Marcus with wide eyes. "Mr. Chen, you killed the monster," he said in amazement. "Just doing my job, kid," Marcus replied, but he was studying the dead creature with growing concern. The thing was even more unnatural up close. Its hide wasn't just dark, it seemed to absorb light at a wavelength that hurt to look at. Its claws were harder than any known material, and the teeth in its skull were arranged in patterns that suggested intelligence. "What the hell is this thing?" asked Jake Morrison, one of the newer colonists. Marcus shook his head. "I don't know, but we need to get the science team down here. This isn't like anything in our wildlife database." As they prepared to return to the settlement, Marcus took one last look at the jungle. He had the uncomfortable feeling that they were being watched, that somewhere in those shadows, intelligent eyes were studying them just as intently as they'd studied the dead predator. The children's laughter had returned as they walked back to safety, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whatever these creatures were, wherever they'd come from, they'd been testing the human colonists. And, based on what had just happened, Marcus wasn't sure humanity had passed the test. The jungle watched them go in silence, and, in that silence, something stirred. The hunt was far from over. Dr. Elena Vasquez had seen many strange things during her 20 years as a xenobiologist, but the creature laid out on her examination table defied every classification system she knew. She'd been studying the dead predator for 6 hours, and each new discovery only raised more questions. "The cellular structure is completely wrong," she muttered to herself, adjusting her scanner for the 5th time. "This thing shouldn't be able to exist." Marcus Chin stood nearby, watching her work. He'd insisted on being present during the examination, claiming it was a security matter. In truth, he needed to understand what they were dealing with. The encounter in the jungle had shaken him more than he cared to admit. "What do you mean shouldn't exist?" he asked. Dr. Vasquez straightened up and rubbed her tired eyes. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the readout on her scanner. "The cellular matrix is partially crystalline, partially organic. The muscle fibers contain traces of titanium and other heavy metals. The neural pathways show quantum entanglement at a macroscopic level. This isn't evolution, Marcus. This is engineering." Marcus felt a cold chill run down his spine. "Engineering? You mean these things are artificial?" "Not artificial exactly, but definitely modified. Someone or something took a base creature and rebuilt it from the ground up. Enhanced its strength, its speed, its intelligence. Even gave it that light-absorbing hide." Marcus thought about the way the plasma bolts had barely affected the creature. "What about the energy resistance?" "The hide contains microscopic crystals that can store and redirect energy," Dr. Vasquez explained. "Essentially, your plasma rifle was charging it up rather than hurting it." "Brilliant, really, in a terrifying sort of way. Then, how did I kill it?" "Point-blank shot to the throat. The crystals can only absorb so much energy before they overload. Plus, the throat area has fewer crystal formations, probably to allow for vocalization." She paused and looked at him seriously. "You got lucky, Marcus." "Very lucky." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of running feet in the corridor outside. Maria Santos burst through the door, her face pale with panic. "Dr. Vasquez, Marcus, you need to come quickly. Something's happening at the perimeter." They followed Maria outside, where a crowd of colonists had gathered near the main gate. Everyone was pointing up at the sky, their faces filled with a mixture of awe and terror. Marcus looked up and saw them, hundreds of creatures circling overhead like massive vultures. They were similar to the predators he'd fought but larger, with wings that seemed to be made of the same light-absorbing material as the others' hide. They made no sound as they flew, creating an eerie silence that seemed to press down on the settlement. "They've been gathering for the past hour," reported Jake Morrison, who was on watch duty. "Just circling, not attacking. It's like they're waiting for something." Marcus activated his comm unit. "All security teams to the perimeter. Everyone else, get to the shelters. Now." As the colonists began moving toward the reinforced buildings at the center of the settlement, Marcus noticed something that made his blood freeze. The flying creatures weren't just circling randomly, they were moving in complex patterns, almost like formations. "They're coordinating," he said to Dr. Vasquez. "Look at the way they're moving. That's not animal behavior." Before she could respond, one of the flying creatures broke away from the formation and descended toward the settlement. Marcus raised his rifle, but the creature didn't attack. Instead, it landed on the outer fence about 50 meters away and just sat there, watching them. Up close, Marcus could see that this creature was different from the others. It was larger, with more complex markings on its hide, and its eyes glowed with a brighter, more intense light. As Marcus watched, it opened its mouth and began making sounds. It took Marcus a moment to realize that the sounds weren't random animal noises. They had structure, rhythm, almost like language. "Is that thing trying to communicate?" Maria whispered. Dr. Vasquez had pulled out a recording device and was capturing the sounds. "If it is, this changes everything. We might be dealing with a genuine alien intelligence." The creature on the fence continued its vocalizations for several minutes, then stopped and tilted its head, as if waiting for a response. When none came, it made a different sound, something that sounded almost disappointed. Then, something extraordinary happened. The creature raised one of its clawed appendages and began scratching marks into the metal fence post. The marks weren't random, they formed geometric patterns, mathematical sequences that any intelligent being would recognize. "Oh my God," Dr. Vasquez breathed. "It's showing us prime numbers." Marcus stared at the patterns taking shape on the fence post. First came simple counting marks, then squares, then what was clearly the Fibonacci sequence. Finally, the creature drew a series of marks that could only be interpreted as a mathematical proof. "It's trying to establish that it's intelligent," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice filled with excitement and fear. "This is first contact, Marcus. Actual first contact with an alien intelligence." The creature finished its mathematical demonstration and looked directly at them. Then, it made a sound that was clearly interrogative, a question. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He stepped forward, pulled out his combat knife, and began carving his own marks into a fence post. Simple mathematical responses to the alien's proofs, showing that humans understood what it was trying to communicate. The effect was immediate. The creature's eyes brightened, and it made sounds that could only be interpreted as excitement. It began carving new, more complex patterns, and Marcus did his best to respond. This continued for nearly an hour, with both species gradually building a basic mathematical dialogue. The flying creatures overhead had stopped circling and were now hovering in place, all of them watching the exchange below. Finally, the alien creature made a series of sounds and gestures that seemed to indicate it wanted to show them something. It pointed toward the jungle, then at itself, then at Marcus. "I think it wants you to follow it," Dr. Vasquez said quietly. "That's probably not a good idea," Marcus replied, but he was curious despite himself. The creature had gone to considerable effort to establish peaceful communication. It seemed genuinely interested in making contact rather than hunting them. The alien seemed to sense his hesitation. It made more sounds, then did something unexpected. It began backing away slowly, keeping its claws visible and non-threatening. It was showing Marcus that it meant no harm. Against his better judgment, Marcus found himself walking toward the fence. The creature waited until he was close, then began moving slowly toward the jungle, stopping frequently to make sure Marcus was following. "Marcus, don't do this," Maria called after him. "It could be a trap." "If they wanted to kill us, they wouldn't need a trap," Marcus replied. "There are hundreds of them up there. They could overwhelm us easily." Dr. Vasquez grabbed his arm. "At least take a comm unit. And, for God's sake, be careful. Marcus followed the alien creature into the jungle, his rifle ready but not raised threateningly. The creature led him through the trees for about half a kilometer before stopping in a large clearing that Marcus had never seen before. What he saw there made him understand that everything they thought they knew about this world was wrong. The clearing contained structures, not natural formations, but deliberately built constructions that rose from the jungle floor like organic skyscrapers. They were beautiful and alien, formed from the same light-absorbing material as the creature's hide but shaped into flowing, artistic forms that seemed to grow rather than having been built. And they were inhabited. Dozens of the alien creatures moved through the structures, engaged in what could only be described as daily activities. Some were tending to smaller creatures that might have been livestock or pets. Others appeared to be working with tools and machinery that Marcus couldn't begin to understand. This wasn't a hunting pack. This was a civilization. The creature that had led him here made more sounds, and other aliens began approaching. Marcus tensed, but they showed no signs of aggression. Instead, they seemed curious, examining him with the same scientific interest that Dr. Vasquez had shown when studying their dead pack mate. One of the approaching aliens was clearly different from the others. It was larger, more ornately marked, and moved with an authority that suggested leadership. When it spoke, the other aliens fell silent and listened. The leader approached Marcus slowly and began making the same mathematical communications that the first alien had used. But, this time, the patterns were more complex, more sophisticated. Marcus did his best to respond, but he was quickly out of his depth. The alien leader seemed to understand this limitation. It made what sounded like a thoughtful noise, then gestured for Marcus to wait. It moved to one of the nearby structures and returned carrying something that made Marcus's heart race. It was a device of some kind, clearly alien in origin but obviously technological. The leader held it out to Marcus, then pointed to its own head and made gestures indicating communication. Marcus hesitated. Accepting unknown alien technology was against every protocol he'd ever learned. But the creature's body language suggested urgency, importance. Whatever it was trying to communicate, it couldn't wait for them to slowly build a common language. Marcus took the device. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with its own internal rhythm. The moment his fingers made contact, his vision exploded with images and sensations that weren't his own. He saw the history of this world through alien eyes. The civilization that had built the structures in the clearing was ancient, far older than human civilization. They had evolved from predators, yes, but they had transcended their violent origins to become something greater. They had been living peacefully on this world for thousands of years until the arrival of something else, another alien species that was everything these creatures were not. Where the local aliens had chosen cooperation and growth, the newcomers chose domination and destruction. The images showed the arrival of massive ships from space, the deployment of the engineered predators that Marcus had encountered, and the systematic hunting of the native population. The creatures Dr. Vasquez had examined weren't members of the local species at all, they were weapons, created by the invaders to hunt down and eliminate the indigenous population. Marcus saw battles in the jungle, the local aliens defending their homes with technology and tactics that seemed almost magical. But they were losing. The invaders were too numerous, too ruthless, and their bioengineered hunters were perfectly designed to kill the local population. The images shifted to show the present situation. The local aliens had been driven to the edge of extinction, hiding in scattered settlements like the one Marcus had just discovered. The invaders controlled most of the world now, and their hunting creatures roamed freely through what had once been a peaceful civilization. But then, the images showed something new, the arrival of the human colony ship. The invaders had been watching the humans, studying them, trying to determine if they were allies or threats. The encounter between Marcus and the hunting creatures had been a test. And Marcus had passed. By defending the human children and killing one of the bioengineered predators, he had proven that humans were natural enemies of the invaders. The local aliens wanted to propose an alliance. The vision ended, and Marcus found himself back in the clearing, surrounded by alien faces that no longer seemed monstrous but merely different. The device had allowed him to understand not just their history, but their language, their culture, their desperate hope for survival. The leader was watching him intently, waiting for his response. Marcus realized that the fate of two species might depend on what he said next. "We'll help you," he said, and somehow he knew the aliens understood. "Humans don't abandon our friends, and we really don't like bullies."
The response from the aliens was immediate and emotional.
They made sounds that could only be joy, relief, and gratitude. Some of them touched him gently with their claws, apparently their equivalent of a handshake or embrace. But, even as Marcus felt hope rising in his chest, he knew the real challenge was just beginning. He had to get back to the settlement and convince 47 other humans to go to war against an alien species they'd never seen, to save another alien species they'd never met. And, somewhere out in the jungle, the invaders' hunting creatures were still moving through the darkness, and their creators were watching from the sky. The alliance had been formed, but the real battle was about to begin. The emergency meeting in the settlement's main hall was unlike anything the colonists had ever experienced. Marcus stood before his fellow humans, the alien translation device still clutched in his hand, trying to explain something that sounded like science fiction even to him. "Let me get this straight," said Dr. Robert Hayes, the settlement's administrator. "You're telling us that the creatures attacking us aren't native to this world, that there's an indigenous alien civilization that wants our help fighting an invasion, and you learned all this by touching some kind of mind-reading device?" Marcus could hear the skepticism in the man's voice, and he didn't blame him. If someone had told him the same story a day ago, he would have recommended immediate psychiatric evaluation. "I know how it sounds," Marcus replied. "But Dr. Vasquez's examination confirmed that the creatures we've been fighting are artificially enhanced. They're weapons, not natural predators." Dr. Vasquez nodded from her seat in the front row. "The biological modifications I found are far beyond anything that could evolve naturally. Someone or something designed these creatures specifically for hunting and killing." "But how do we know we can trust these aliens?" asked Maria Santos. "Maybe this is all some elaborate deception to make us lower our defenses." Marcus had expected this question. "Because they didn't need to deceive us. There were hundreds of them in that clearing, and hundreds more flying overhead. If they wanted to destroy us, they could have done it at any time." Tommy Kim raised his hand from where he sat with the other children. "Mr. Chen, are the nice aliens the same ones that saved Lisa and me?" "No, Tommy," Marcus replied gently. "The ones that threatened you were the bad aliens, the invaders. The good aliens want to protect their children just like we want to protect ours." This seemed to resonate with many of the colonists. Parents exchanged glances, remembering their own fear when they'd learned that children had been in danger. Jake Morrison stood up from the back of the hall. "Assuming you're right about all this, what exactly are they asking us to do?" "We're 47 civilians with limited weapons and no military training except for you." Marcus had been thinking about this question during his walk back from the alien settlement. "They're not asking us to fight their war for them. They want to share information and coordinate our defenses. The invaders see us as a potential threat now, especially after I killed one of their hunting creatures. We're already in this fight whether we like it or not." Dr. Vasquez activated her tablet and projected a hologram of the dead creature onto the wall. "Based on my analysis, these bioengineered hunters have several weaknesses we can exploit. They're vulnerable to sustained plasma fire at close range, their crystalline height can overload if subjected to specific energy frequencies, and they seem to have limited night vision despite their other enhancements." "What about the aliens who created them?" asked Sarah Kim, the teacher. "What do we know about the invaders themselves?" Marcus consulted the memories he'd received from the translation device. "They're called the Devourers, at least that's the closest translation. They're a nomadic species that moves from world to world, stripping them of resources and eliminating native populations. They've been doing this for thousands of years. How many of them are we talking about?" Dr. Hayes wanted to know. "On this world? Maybe a few thousand. But they have ships in orbit, and more forces that could arrive if needed. The local aliens, they call themselves the Keepers, estimate that we have maybe 6 months before the Devourers decide we're enough of a threat to warrant a full-scale assault." The hall fell silent as the colonists absorbed this information. Marcus could see fear in their faces, but also something else, determination. These people had come here to build a new life, and they weren't going to give up without a fight. Lisa Santos, despite being only 6 years old, stood up on her chair. "If the bad aliens hurt the good aliens' babies, then we have to help them. Right, Daddy?" Her father, Engineer Carlos Santos, smiled despite the gravity of the situation. "Right, mi amor. We protect our friends." The vote, when it came, was unanimous. The Newton colony would ally with the Keepers against the Devourer invasion. Over the next several days, the settlement transformed into something resembling a military base. The keepers provided intelligence about devourer movements and weaknesses, while the humans shared their technology and tactical knowledge. Marcus discovered that the keepers, despite their advanced biotechnology, had never developed kinetic weapons. Their entire military philosophy was based on energy manipulation and defensive systems.
The concept of projectile weapons was completely foreign to them.
"They're actually amazed that we figured out how to throw rocks at our enemies," Marcus explained to a group of colonists who were helping to modify their industrial equipment into improvised weapons.
To them, it's like we're primitive geniuses. The keepers, for their part, were fascinated by human adaptability.
Their leader, who had introduced himself through the translation device as something like Harmony Beneath Stars, spent hours learning about human history and culture. "Your species survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and countless natural disasters," the alien leader had communicated to Marcus. "You learned to thrive in environments that should have killed you."
The Devourers have never faced anything like human tenacity.
The first real test of the Alliance came 3 days after the pact was made. A pack of 12 hunting creatures launched a coordinated assault on the settlement's eastern perimeter just after sunset.
But, this time, the humans were ready.
Marcus had positioned teams of colonists at key points around the settlement, each armed with modified mining equipment that could fire sustained energy bursts. Dr. Vasquez had programmed the weapons to cycle through the specific frequencies that could overload the creature's crystal and hide. The keepers provided support from concealed positions in the jungle, using their biotechnology to confuse and misdirect the attacking creatures. They could manipulate the local plant life, creating false scents and sounds that led the hunters into prepared ambush zones. When the attack came, it was like nothing the Devourers had expected. Instead of panicked civilians running for shelter, they faced coordinated resistance from two species working in perfect synchronization. Marcus watched from the command post as his carefully planned defenses engaged the enemy. The hunting creatures, accustomed to easy prey, found themselves caught in crossfires from weapons they couldn't understand, harassed by environmental hazards that seemed to spring from the jungle itself. "Energy discharge successful in Sector 3, reported Jake Morrison over the comb. 2 creatures down, moving to secondary position."
"Keepers report successful misdirection in Sector 5, added Dr. Vasquez, who was coordinating with the aliens through the translation device. 3 more creatures led into trap zone.
The battle lasted less than 20 minutes. When it was over, 10 of the 12 hunting creatures were dead, and the other 2 had fled back into the jungle. The human colonists had suffered only minor injuries, mostly from overheated equipment. More importantly, they had sent a clear message to the Devourers: this world was no longer defenseless. The response came 2 days later. Marcus was reviewing defensive positions with Harmony Beneath Stars when every comm unit in the settlement activated simultaneously. The voice that emerged from the speakers was clearly artificial, probably a translation program similar to the one the keepers used. But the message was unmistakably hostile. "Primitive species of the third planet's moon," the voice said in stilted but understandable English. "You have interfered with authorized harvesting operations.
This violation of galactic resource allocation protocols will not be tolerated."
Marcus and Harmony Beneath Stars exchanged glances.
The Devourer spoke as if genocide was just a business transaction.
"You will surrender all indigenous biological samples and submit to relocation processing," the voice continued.
"Compliance will result in minimal termination of unnecessary individuals. Resistance will result in complete sterilization of your settlement zone. You have 48 standard time units to comply. Failure to respond appropriately will trigger immediate military intervention." The transmission ended, leaving the settlement in stunned silence. "Well," said Marcus after a long moment, "I guess diplomacy is off the table." Harmony Beneath Stars made sounds that the translation device interpreted as bitter amusement. The Devourers do not negotiate. They consume or they destroy.
There is no third option. That night, Marcus stood on the settlement's observation tower, looking up at the stars. Somewhere among those points of light, alien ships were preparing for war. Ships filled with creatures designed specifically for killing, commanded by beings who saw entire civilizations as nothing more than obstacles to be removed. But, as Marcus looked down at the settlement below, he saw something the Devourers couldn't understand. Human children playing with young keepers, their laughter carrying across the compound. Engineers and alien biotechnicians working side by side to strengthen their defenses. Two species that had met as strangers and become allies in a matter of days. The Devourers might have superior technology and overwhelming numbers, but they had never faced the one thing that humans did better than any other species in the galaxy, turning desperate circumstances into opportunities for heroism. Marcus activated his comm unit and contacted every team leader in the settlement. All department heads to the command center in 30 minutes. We have a war to plan. As he prepared to leave the tower, movement in the jungle caught his eye. Keeper scouts were returning from there. The Devourer ships descended through the atmosphere like falling stars, their hulls gleaming with the same light-absorbing material that covered their bioengineered weapons. Marcus watched from the hidden observation post as 12 massive vessels settled into landing formations across the jungle moon's surface. "My God," whispered Dr. Vasquez, peering through her scanner. "Each one of those ships is the size of a city block. How many troops could they carry?" Harmony Beneath Stars communicated through the translation device, his mental voice heavy with ancient pain. "The Devourers do not use troops as you understand them. They use swarms. Each ship carries thousands of hunting creatures, plus the Devourer overlords who direct them." Marcus studied the tactical display that showed the positions of all 12 ships. The Devourers had chosen their landing sites with obvious strategic intent. They formed a perfect encirclement around both the human settlement and the largest Keeper refuge. There would be no escape routes, no place to run. "How long do we have?" asked Carlos Santos, who had become the settlement's chief engineer since the alliance began. "The 48-hour deadline expires in 6 hours, Marcus replied. "But, based on Keeper intelligence, they'll probably attack at dawn whether we surrender or not. The Devourers don't actually want prisoners, they just enjoy the psychological torture of false hope." Maria Santos checked her weapon for the third time in 10 minutes. Like all the colonists, she had transformed from civilian to soldier over the past week. "What about the children? If this goes badly?" "The children will be safe," Harmony Beneath Stars assured her. "We have prepared deep sanctuaries that even Devourer technology cannot penetrate. You're young and ours will survive together, no matter what happens to us." Marcus appreciated the alien certainty, but he had no intention of letting it come to that. The battle plan they had developed was desperate and probably suicidal, but it was based on one crucial advantage the Devourers didn't know they had. The Keepers possessed something the Devourers had never encountered in all their centuries of conquest: detailed knowledge of human military history. "Are the charges in place?" Marcus asked Carlos. "All set. Mining explosives rigged at every predetermined position. The Keeper's organic compounds will amplify the blast effects by at least 300%. Ammunition? Every plasma rifle modified for frequency cycling, plus 200 improvised projectile weapons. The Keepers still think we're crazy for throwing metal at our enemies, but they've seen how effective it can be." Marcus nodded. The combination of human kinetic weapons and Keeper biotechnology had proven devastating against the hunting creatures. Hopefully, it would work against their masters as well. The first sign of the attack came not from the landed ships, but from the sky above. Thousands of flying creatures emerged from the vessels and began circling overhead in the same formations Marcus had seen before. But, this time, there were too many to count. "Aerial assault incoming," reported Jake Morrison from his position in the watchtower. "Jesus, there must be 10,000 of them up there." "Phase 1, initiate," Marcus commanded. Around the settlement's perimeter, hidden Keeper biotechnology activated. Plants that had looked ordinary suddenly began releasing clouds of spores into the air, not harmful to humans or Keepers, but devastating to the Devourer's aerial forces. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The flying creatures began falling from the sky as their respiratory systems shut down. Within minutes, thousands of bioengineered weapons lay twitching on the jungle floor. "Direct hit," Dr. Vasquez reported with satisfaction. "The Keeper's biochemical warfare is more sophisticated than anything we ever imagined." But the victory was short-lived. The Devourer ships responded by launching something new: metallic drones that seemed immune to the Keeper's biological weapons. These machines began methodically destroying the spore-producing plants with precise energy beams. "Phase 2, Marcus ordered." The colonists emerged from their hidden positions and began targeting the drones with their modified weapons. The combination of human accuracy and Keeper-enhanced ammunition proved effective against the mechanical attackers, but more kept coming. From the jungle surrounding the settlement came sounds that chilled Marcus to the bone: the howling of hundreds of hunting creatures moving through the underbrush. The ground assault was beginning.
Contact, Sector 7.
Maria's voice crackled over the calm 20-plus creatures, moving fast. Sector 4 engaged, called out Dr. Hayes, who had transformed from administrator to squad leader.
Carlos, we need those frequency modulators online now.
The battle erupted across the entire perimeter simultaneously. The Devourers had learned from their previous defeats and were attacking with overwhelming force at every position. But Marcus and Harmony Beneath Stars had anticipated this.
Initiate retreat protocol, Marcus commanded.
What looked like a panicked withdrawal was actually a carefully planned maneuver.
The human defenders fell back to secondary positions while Keeper Biotechnology created the illusion of a rout.
The hunting creatures, programmed for aggression, pursued their apparently fleeing prey directly into the trap. The modified mining charges detonated in sequence, enhanced by Keeper organic compounds that turned simple explosions into devastating biochemical cascades. Entire packs of hunting creatures were eliminated instantly, and the survivors found themselves caught in carefully prepared crossfires. But, even as they celebrated these early victories, Marcus could see that the situation was becoming desperate. For every creature they destroyed, 2 more emerged from the ships. The Devourers had brought enough forces to overwhelm any defense through sheer numbers. Marcus, Dr. Vasquez called out over the noise of battle, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the ships. I think they're preparing to launch their primary weapons." Through his binoculars, Marcus could see the Devourer vessels beginning to glow with internal energy. Whatever they were charging up, it was going to be devastating. "All teams, fall back to final positions," he ordered.
Implement Emergency Protocol 7.
Emergency Protocol 7 was something they had hoped never to use. It required abandoning the settlement entirely and retreating to the deep jungle, where human technology and Keeper biotechnology could be combined for guerrilla warfare. It meant giving up everything they had built, but it also meant survival. As the colonists began their withdrawal, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself.
Instead of following the retreat, he began moving toward the nearest Devourer ship. "Marcus, what are you doing?"
Maria's voice was sharp with panic.
"That's the opposite direction."
"Someone needs to buy you time to get clear," he replied, checking his weapon one final time. "The children need to reach the sanctuary."
"Don't you dare play hero," Dr. Vasquez commanded. "We need you alive."
But Marcus had already made his choice. He had studied the Devourer ships during their landing, and he had noticed something important: they had brought their command vessels down to the surface, probably to direct the battle more effectively.
If he could disable even one of those ships, it might disrupt their entire operation.
Harmony Beneath Stars suddenly appeared beside him, moving through the jungle with the fluid grace of his species.
"You cannot do this alone," the alien leader communicated. "We will go together."
"This isn't your fight," Marcus protested. "You defended our children," Harmony Beneath Stars replied.
"Now we defend yours."
They moved through the jungle together, human determination combined with alien knowledge of the terrain. Behind them, the evacuation continued under covering fire from the remaining defenders. Ahead, the Devourer ship loomed like a metallic mountain. As they approached the vessel, Marcus could see the creatures that were directing the battle. The Devourers themselves were unlike anything he had imagined, towering beings that seemed to be part machine, part biological matter. They moved with deliberate precision, communicating through energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. "The ship's power core is at the base," Harmony Beneath Stars explained. "If we can overload it, the explosion will damage the other vessels and disrupt their coordination." Marcus nodded, then pulled out the largest explosive charge they had. It was crude compared to the technology around them, but sometimes crude was exactly what was needed. They crept closer to the ship's base, avoiding the mechanical sentries that patrolled the perimeter. The power core was exactly where Harmony Beneath Stars had said it would be, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with captured energy. "Set the charge," Marcus whispered. "I'll provide cover." As Harmony Beneath Stars worked with the explosive device, Marcus heard sounds that made his blood freeze. They had been discovered. Devourer creatures were converging on their position from all directions. "How much longer?" he asked, raising his rifle.
30 seconds, came the reply.
Marcus began firing at the approaching creatures, but there were too many of them. Just as his ammunition ran out, Keeper reinforcements emerged from the jungle, dozens of the alien warriors who had decided that this human's courage deserved their support. The battle around the Devourer ship was fierce but brief. When the explosion came, it was far more powerful than Marcus had expected. The ship's power core didn't just overload, it created a chain reaction that spread to the other vessels. One by one, the Devourer ships began exploding in spectacular displays of light and energy. The creatures attacking the settlement suddenly found themselves without coordination, without leadership, without purpose. As Marcus and his alien allies retreated toward the sanctuary, the jungle behind them lit up with the fires of a dozen destroyed ships. The immediate threat was over, but Marcus knew this was just the beginning. Somewhere in space, other Devourer fleets would receive word of this defeat. They would come to investigate, to punish, to ensure that such resistance never happened again. But, when they arrived, they would find something the Devourers had never encountered before: two species united not by conquest or domination, but by the simple desire to protect their children and defend their homes. The Devourers might have superior technology and overwhelming numbers, but they had never faced the one force in the universe that could overcome any advantage: the determination of beings fighting for something greater than themselves. The war was far from over, but humanity and their new allies had just proven that sometimes the hunters could become the hunted. 6 months after the Battle of the Burning Ships, Marcus Chin stood in the command center of New Harmony Station, watching tactical displays that showed a transformation he could barely have imagined. What had begun as a desperate alliance between 47 human colonists and a handful of surviving keepers had become something unprecedented in galactic history. Incoming transmission from the Perseus sector, announced Lieutenant Sarah Kim, who now served as the station's communications officer. The teacher had proven remarkably adept at military logistics. The Alt-Iran Defense Force reports successful implementation of Human Keeper combined tactics. 3 Devourer scouting fleets destroyed with minimal casualties. Marcus nodded, adding another victory to the growing list. Word of their success had spread through subspace communications faster than anyone had anticipated. Species across the galaxy that had been hiding from Devourer expansion were suddenly reaching out, asking for help, wanting to join what some were calling the Guardian Alliance. Status report on the fleet construction? Marcus asked. Carlos Santos, now bearing the rank of chief engineer, pulled up a holographic display showing the orbital shipyards that had grown around Kepler 442c. 18 ships completed this month, 12 more in final assembly. The hybrid technology is exceeding all projections. Marcus smiled as he studied the ship designs. The vessels were unlike anything that had ever existed: human engineering combined with Keeper biotechnology, creating warships that were part machine, part living organism. They could heal damage automatically, adapt to new threats in real time, and were armed with weapons that no enemy could predict or counter. The Devourers still don't understand what they're facing, observed Admiral Harmony Beneath Stars, who had accepted the human military rank with what Marcus had learned to recognize as alien amusement. Their entire tactical philosophy is based on overwhelming force and intimidation. They cannot comprehend an enemy that grows stronger through cooperation. The door to the command center opened, and Dr. Elena Vesquez entered carrying a datapad and wearing the satisfied expression of someone with good news to share. The medical integration project has achieved another breakthrough. We can now synthesize Keeper immune systems with human physiology. Our people will be immune to 97% of known Devourer biological weapons. Marcus was about to respond when alarms began sounding throughout the station. Lieutenant Kim's face went pale as she read her displays. "Sir, we're detecting massive hyperspace signatures on the system's edge. Configuration matches Devourer battlefleet protocols." The main display activated to show long-range sensor readings. What Marcus saw made his stomach clench with familiar fear. Hundreds of ships were emerging from hyperspace, far more than the scouting forces they had been dealing with for the past 6 months. "Size estimate?" he asked quietly. "Preliminary count suggests over 800 vessels, including at least 12 super dreadnoughts," Kim replied. "Sir, this isn't an exploration fleet or a punitive expedition. This is an armada designed for planetary annihilation." Marcus activated the station-wide communication system. "All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Initiate evacuation protocol for all civilian populations to the deep shelters." As the station burst into controlled activity, Marcus found himself remembering the first time he had faced a Devourer hunting pack. Back then, he had been protecting 2 children with nothing but a plasma rifle and determination. Now he was responsible for protecting dozens of species across multiple star systems.
Admiral Harmony, he said formally, please activate the Alliance communication network. All member fleets are to converge on our position immediately.
Already in progress, the alien officer replied.
However, our nearest allies are 18 hours away. We will face the initial assault alone.
Marcus studied the tactical display, running calculations in his head. They had 43 ships in the immediate area, all equipped with the revolutionary Human Keeper hybrid technology. The Devourers had brought 20 times that number, but their vessels were built according to ancient patterns that had never been tested against truly innovative resistance.
Carlos, how quickly can we implement Emergency Protocol Omega? Marcus asked. The engineer's eyes widened.
Emergency Protocol Omega was something they had developed as a theoretical last resort, a plan so dangerous that just discussing it had required special security clearance.
The gravitational resonance generators could be online in 4 hours, Carlos replied slowly.
But, sir, if we're wrong about the calculations, we could destabilize the entire system.
And, if we're right about the calculations? We turn the system's asteroid belt into the galaxy's largest shotgun blast.
Marcus made the decision that would either save or doom everything they had built.
Do it.
And broadcast the technical specifications to all Alliance vessels. If this works, I want every fleet in known space to have access to the technology. As the station prepared for battle, Marcus walked to the observation deck where the children of New Harmony Colony were being evacuated to the deep shelters. Tommy Kim, now 8.5 years old, ran up to him as he passed.
Mr. Chan, are the bad aliens coming back? Marcus knelt down to the boy's level. Yes, Tommy. But, this time, we're ready for them. Are you scared?
Marcus considered lying, then decided the boy deserved honesty.
Yes, I'm scared.
But being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave.
Sometimes being scared is what makes you brave. Tommy nodded solemnly, then hugged Marcus tightly. You stopped the monsters before. You can do it again.
As the evacuation continued, Marcus returned to the command center where the tactical situation was developing rapidly. The Devourer fleet had entered the outer system and was moving toward Kepler 442c in a formation designed for maximum intimidation. Their communications were broadcasting surrender demands in dozens of languages.
They're offering the same terms as before, Lieutenant Kim reported.
Surrender all indigenous biological samples, submit to relocation processing, minimal termination of unnecessary individuals. Same response as before, Marcus replied.
Tell them we'll consider their terms right after they consider a detailed anatomical impossibility involving their own reproductive systems. The first engagement began at the edge of the system's asteroid belt.
Devourer scouts encountered the advance elements of the Guardian fleet, and both sides learned immediately that this would be unlike any battle either had ever fought. The Guardian ships moved like living things, flowing around enemy fire and striking from unexpected angles. Their weapons adapted in real time to enemy defenses, shifting frequencies and tactics faster than any programmed response could counter. But the Devourers had brought overwhelming numbers. For every Guardian ship, there were 20 enemy vessels. Even with superior technology and tactics, the mathematics of destruction were working against them. Guardian Fleet Alpha reports 70% casualties, Kim announced, her voice tight with strain.
They're falling back to secondary positions.
Marcus watched the displays and saw the pattern emerging. The Devourers were doing exactly what they always did, using massive force to overwhelm resistance through sheer attrition. It was a strategy that had worked for them across thousands of worlds and countless civilizations. It was also exactly what Marcus had been counting on.
Carlos, status on Protocol Omega? Generators online and synchronized. We're ready to implement on your command.
Marcus activated the fleet communication system.
All Guardian vessels, execute Dispersal Pattern 7. Clear the asteroid belt immediately. This is going to get interesting.
The Devourer fleet pursued the apparently retreating Guardians into the asteroid belt, their formation tightening as they prepared for the final destruction of the rebellion. Their ships moved between the floating rocks with arrogant confidence, treating the asteroids as minor navigational hazards. Energy readings are spiking across the entire Devourer fleet, Dr. Vasquez reported. They're preparing for coordinated planetary bombardment.
Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now. Marcus took a deep breath and spoke the words that would change galactic warfare forever. All stations, execute Protocol Omega. Maximum power to gravitational resonance generators.
Space around Kepler 442c suddenly writhed with invisible forces as the Guardian vessels began generating synchronized gravitational waves. The effect was imperceptible at first, then, gradually became impossible to ignore.
The asteroids in the belt began moving, slowly at first, then, with increasing velocity.
Thousands of chunks of rock and metal, some as large as city blocks, began accelerating toward the Devourer fleet like a cosmic avalanche. Gravitational resonance is achieving perfect harmony, Carlos reported, his voice filled with excitement and terror.
The entire belt is mobilizing.
The Devourer fleet found themselves caught in the middle of the galaxy's most devastating natural weapon. Asteroids moving at significant percentages of lightspeed began impacting their vessels, and their energy shields, designed to stop directed energy weapons, were useless against kinetic bombardment on such a massive scale. Ships that had survived thousands of battles across the galaxy were torn apart by chunks of rock moving faster than bullets. The superdreadnoughts, confident in their superiority, became floating debris as asteroids the size of mountains punched through their hulls like paper.
Direct hits on 8 superdreadnoughts, Kim reported with amazement. Over 400 smaller vessels destroyed or disabled. The remaining fleet is breaking formation and attempting to retreat.
But Marcus wasn't finished. All Guardian vessels, pursue and engage. Today we show the galaxy that the age of Devourer expansion is over. The battle that followed was more like a hunt than a military engagement. Guardian ships, working in perfect coordination with their human and Keeper crews, systematically destroyed the fleeing Devourer vessels. The enemy's numerical advantage became meaningless when they were scattered and demoralized. When it was over, fewer than 50 Devourer ships had escaped to hyperspace. The rest lay broken among the asteroid debris, their threat ended forever. Marcus stood in the observation deck, watching the lights of distant explosions fade among the stars. Around him, human and Keeper children played together, their laughter echoing through the corridors of New Harmony Station. They would grow up in a galaxy where monsters were no longer invincible, where cooperation had proven stronger than conquest.
"It's over," Dr. Vasquez said quietly, joining him at the window.
"No," Marcus replied, thinking of all the worlds still under Devourer control, all the species still hiding in fear.
"It's just beginning.
Today we proved that bullies can be beaten.
Tomorrow we start liberating the galaxy."
In the depths of space, emergency beacons activated across dozens of star systems as species that had hidden for centuries began emerging from their shelters. The Guardian Alliance was growing, and, with it, a new age of galactic civilization based not on domination and fear, but on the simple principle Marcus had learned while defending 2 children in a jungle clearing. Sometimes the best way to protect your own cubs is to make sure all the cubs in the galaxy are safe. The hunting beasts had been challenged, and they had lost. The age of the protectors had begun.